Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another Nacho Tuesday. And I have Doug here today with Simon Marketing. And without further ado, we would love if you could introduce yourself and your company.
Absolutely. So I'm Doug Simon, and I run a company called Simon Fractional. Basically, what we do is we help B2B SaaS teams accelerate revenue by aligning ICP and personas with consistent messaging across positioning, go-to-market, and the sales funnel. We basically diagnose where positioning and messaging break across the funnel, and we simplify and align the story so everything downstream works better.
Nice. So when people hear brand positioning, a lot of times people just think about messaging or design. But how do you define that at a more foundational level?
Sure. Well, the terminology can definitely be a little bit confusing. And I like to define positioning not really as a tagline, but it's the internal framework for how marketing should understand you and why you'd want to win. Brand positioning is really who you're serving, the problem that you're going to own, plus the outcome that you want to deliver. And at the end of the day, it's really why are you better than other options? And for that, you really need to include proof points in your reasoning as well.
Mm-hmm. What are some common proof points you could probably include, like stats, maybe testimonials from customers?
Absolutely. Anything related to quantitative improvements, testimonials from customers, little case studies. Those are all very helpful for proof points.
Yep. So you mentioned, knowing your audience is really important. So I guess why is ICP the clarity of foundation for positioning, and where do companies usually get that wrong? As I say, if you're trying to serve everybody, you serve nobody at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Really, ICPs are used to develop your whole framework, which really would include your brand strategy, your narrative, and then your messaging. So like you said, if it's not honed in properly, none of your messaging is really going to really resonate or work. And at the end of the day, what's going to suffer is really your sales. What we see really is that most teams, they kind of stop at the demographic data part of the ICPs, or they're, like you said, defining their ICP way too broadly. Strong ICPs really address persona challenges, and they speak to their personas in a language that they can really relate to.
That's a good point. So understanding the problem solution dynamics, probably the most important thing to start with too.
Absolutely.
Nice. So I guess what are some common positioning mistakes that you see SaaS companies making today, and how can they avoid those?
Yeah, you really nailed the big one on the head, is that most positioning issues that we see come down to really two things. One is being too broad. And then the other one is really another problem that's very prevalent, is that a lot of companies will lead with their product and their features.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that if you can lead with one persona and one problem, then you have an opportunity to really pull those people in and kind of learn more after that. It sounds counterintuitive, but you're never going to get them in the door if you're really saying too much. You really have to keep it laser focused to get them in to be able to tell the rest of your story.
Yeah. So would you recommend messaging maybe around identifying the problem, or does this sound like a problem for you? How would you hit the nail on the head there in terms of how you position your messaging?
Yeah, I think the first step is to really understand your persona, really peel back that onion and figure out what keeps them up at night. What are they tasked with at work? And once you figure out what these problems are, there's usually a finite list of use cases or issues that they face. And typically what I suggest is leading with the most impactful one. And then, like I said, once you get them in the door, you can really open up the communication, the dialogue to explain other aspects of it.
So I guess what kind of signals would a SaaS company be able to see that might determine that they have a positioning problem as opposed to a demand or a product problem?
Yeah, I think this is a big question. And for this, I really like to look at two places to diagnose issues. One is sort of the quantitative data around the funnel metrics. And then two is I really like to put my ear to the ground and talk to sales and figure out what they're hearing. So for the first part, for the funnel metrics, basically what you can look at are some of the KPIs. For example, what kind of form fill numbers are you getting? How many demos are you booking? Are you actually closing those deals? And then for sales, the qualitative data, the qualitative feedback is really important. They can hear the buyer confusion on the demo calls. They might hear pushback like, I'm not quite ready for this, or they might hear other objections that can really help to figure out, is this the storytelling or is it the actual product that we have in the market?
Mhm. Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's a lot that could be diagnosed with qualitative signals, like you mentioned. That could be just, even not explicitly what a customer says in a buyer call. It could be, maybe the questions that they ask as well that might also suggest that they're confused about certain value propositions that you have.
Absolutely.
So how would you how would you use positioning to influence product decisions, not just marketing copy? So you could kind of back it up with the way your product's designed and the value that your product actually produces as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good question because I think they should both work in tandem. While positioning should definitely live obviously within the brand, I think it should also act as a sounding board for product decisions. So, for
Yep.
example, if your company is claiming a specific outcome, your product roadmap, it better be linked to make that claim true, and you better be doing everything you can to reinforce your storytelling. When your product can reinforce your positioning, you're kind of flipping it on its head, and that really helps your believability.
Yep. Yeah. So brand positioning is kind of like branding is like really that North Star for your company, not only just for what the marketing department's doing, but also that plays back into product and all those decisions that you make as well.
Yeah.
Great. So I guess if you're a founder or marketer, and you can only fix one marketing or positioning element this quarter, what should it be?
I would say if I could work on only one thing, I would definitely go back to the ICP and the persona depth.
Yep.
To me, it's a living, breathing thing. It really needs constant iteration. I think the questions that I would want to ask would be, are the persona challenges, are they shifting? Is the market moving? Are there new competitors? Back to sales, what types of objections are really showing up?
Yep.
And then once you learn all that information, you can iterate whatever's necessary between your brand strategy, your narrative, or your messaging. Sometimes you're just going to be tweaking. Sometimes you might leave things as is, but the market changes, people change, jobs change, and you really have to keep your finger on the pulse.
Yep. Yeah. So you feel like a lot of companies just kind of get stale. They just, think the same thing that worked 5 years ago will work today.
Yeah, a lot of times we'll see write-ups of personas, and they'll be dated a couple of years ago, and there won't have been any iteration since. And once we uncover those even those small nuances, it can really open up the storytelling quite a bit.
And I feel like, especially these days, the market's changing really quickly. I mean, there's new companies launching all the time. It's cheaper and faster than ever before. Advertising's, getting pretty expensive, but everybody's trying to get eyeballs everywhere they go. So it's a really noisy market that we exist in today.
Yeah, it really is.
So what are your thoughts on like the value of between going, niche and versus a little bit more broader as a startup? It's important to really nail like a really niche audience first and then kind of land and expand from there.
I do think so. I think depending on how your product is built, it's usually in it could be in a specific industry. It could be industry agnostic. And once you're talking about the main benefit, the main takeaway from your persona, you can really do that land and expand. But if you're not nailing the problem or the language or the storytelling right away, you're going to be chasing after everything.
Yeah. So I guess what type of companies do you best gel with? Who do you look to work with typically at your company?
We like the challenge. We work best with B2B tech and SaaS where the product is really good and it's usually very complex and the market is really crowded. So a lot of times our customers will have some traction, but their sales, they might be slow. They might be under plan, and they almost definitely have an underdeveloped marketing strategy to go with it. I would also say that our gel with our customers are really founder led. what we find a lot of times is that teams are just way too close to their own product, and it makes it really difficult to see their product from the lens of their persona. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we see.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's easy to fall in love with their product. Or I always tell marketers and founders to fall in love with their customer. Then what they need will kind of dictate what the product actually looks like.
Yeah, the feedback loop definitely needs to be closed and discussed quite often with your prospects and with your current customers. There's no doubt about it.
Yep. So I guess why is brand positioning so overlooked then, especially for early stage and growth stage companies? I feel like a lot of times it becomes an afterthought. And like you mentioned earlier, a lot of companies love focusing on their features and love talking about their features as opposed to figuring out that story narrative that really connects with their customers.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I think almost, I would say rightfully so. Early stage companies, they're prioritizing their product releases, their sales, closing deals. So positioning tends to get a little bit deferred until they start seeing other metrics that might not be working. What we see is that a lot of founder-led selling can be very effective in the beginning, but to really bring that across the organization is really hard. And I also think that most founders think that the products can do all the selling for them, when in reality, it's the storytelling that you're giving. It's not so much the exact product itself.
Yeah, I believe that too. I think a lot of people won't even give your product a second thought or the time of day to really truly evaluate it if the story is not clear. So even if it is the right product for them, and it would immensely help them, if you don't have that story right and you don't kind of pull them into it and get their ear and interest, you're not going to be able to get them to the next level where they'll give you more time than the typical attention span of a goldfish that we have to actually evaluate your product and do the comparison to see if the features and pricing match what they're looking for to make a decision on.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So I guess how narrow should positioning be, and how do companies avoid positioning themselves into a corner, especially at the beginning? We mentioned earlier that it is good to land and expand, but how do you prevent yourself from maybe getting too niche and not being able to expand past that as you grow?
Yeah, I think this is a tough one, and it's a real balancing act, especially because no founder really wants to agree to target less people, right? They want a broad shotgun, but as we were discussing, the narrower your positioning, the really more efficient your funnel is going to be. You're going to have less friction. People are going to self opt in, and what I found is that if you can really pick. You might have many personas and obviously many problems that you can solve, but like we were discussing earlier, if you can pick one primary persona and one primary problem, you can definitely keep yourself positioned where then you can do the land and expand. You can add your secondary use cases after sort of you've earned that trust. But if you try to say too much, or if you to the flip side, try to say too little, you're gonna not resonate with the people's challenges and problems that they have.
Yeah, definitely. How do you distinguish, I guess, between positioning, messaging, and brand? Why do teams often confuse them? They think they're all exactly the same thing.
Yeah, they sound like they're very similar, and it kind of comes back to the notion of everybody thinks they can do marketing, which is another challenge on itself, and probably a webinar for another day. But
Yep.
Those terms are definitely related. They're not the same thing, and when you mix them up, you definitely cause some inconsistencies across your executions and across your copy and your messaging. So basically, the way I would define it is. Brand is really sort of the perception and the positioning. It's an internal choice of what you're chosen for. And then when you expand out to messaging, it's really how you're going to express it, how you're going to tell your story. Teams confuse them because they see headlines, they see taglines, but they don't really see the strategic framework that's underneath these. So I think that's why a lot of times as marketers, we're doing a lot of education to our customers, sort of as we're developing these different aspects of their marketing strategy and their plan.
Yep. And consistency is probably the most important thing there. So once you've nailed this strategy down, like you're consistent across all of your messaging, all of your channels, every employee is kind of marching to the same tune.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite examples of that was a couple of gigs ago. I was working at a health and safety software platform, and we brought structure to the branding, the brand strategy, the framework, even so much as through the accounting department. I mean, everybody was speaking the same language. We were all saying the same thing, and it really just made for a much more cohesive story.
And even the product guys, the engineers should understand too. So like they can evaluate important features and like what to actually build, and if those features serve the bigger brand narrative, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yep. So yeah, tell us actually, I want to dive more into your background. So what made you want to get into marketing from the beginning?
Sure. So when I graduated college, I actually worked in advertising for a number of years. I had the privilege of working through some CPG clients, and CPG is really sort of the end all be all for advertising. They have the biggest resources. They test strategy on everything. They test execution across the board, especially working on TV campaigns, TV commercials. And once I got my MBA, I went to night school while I was working. That was very, very, very challenging. But I really wanted to be part of not only advertising, but the marketing side and the P&L and the product development and manufacturing, if I could be. And that's when I made the decision after getting my MBA to really switch to the marketing side. And that's also where I got my love and desire to also get into the startup world. So
Yep.
I like to describe my background as sort of three concentric circles: advertising, marketing, and startups. And that really gives me an interesting viewpoint. I get to see things from inside and from outside. And I don't think a lot of people who do marketing have had the privilege to be able to see all those sides of things. So I think I'm able to come at things from a really different angle.
That's a good point, actually. Some of the best marketers, from what I've seen in the past, to understand, the product side. They understand the financial implications of things. So that, yeah, the more perspective that you have across the organization, the better you can be at your job too.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been very helpful to me, at least, to see, like I said, the inside, the outside, the partnerships, the working with agencies, because I was working inside of an agency. And I think just having that exposure is really great. I mean, a lot of times companies will only try to hire you if you have specific industry experience. But, I'm sort of in the camp where when you do a lot of different things or have done a lot of different things, your process is honed in where it can really affect a number of different categories or a number of different products. And I think that gives you a really great outsider's perspective, but you can still deal with the inner workings of brand and brand strategy. So I think it's a really nice holistic view.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. If you have you could actually learn things from other types of products or companies and lessons from that you could apply to, whatever new company you're working in. And if you're running advertising, it's pretty much the same thing. There's some slight nuances to it, of course, there always is. But for somebody that just understands conceptually, advertising, or say in your case, branding, it's very easy to come into a new company or product and, kind of get your thought process moving on it and figure out, how would you solve that problem? But if you have that holistic view, like you mentioned, and these different experiences, you might have, better perspective to be able to bring something new to the table and actually get better results from it.
I agree. And my last thing on that is really, when you bring in an outsider, they don't have the luxury of spending weeks, months, years learning your product. And that's very similar to a prospect. You don't have much time to communicate. And that's why sort of strategic frameworks and clarifying complicated products into really simple storytelling almost from an outsider's perspective, is really, really helpful, because if you don't get it and you're a smart person, then other people who are smart are not going to get it either.
Yep. Yeah, it's very easy for people that work within the company for so long to just kind of, like we mentioned earlier, march to the same tune. And because of that, you might be missing, what your actual customers or the outside world really perceives you to be.
Yeah.
So I guess any other exciting trends in marketing you see this year, as especially B2B marketing, that you expect to see more over the next year, not just in terms of branding, but maybe, advertising, maybe the use of AI. Do you have any insights there?
Yeah, obviously the proliferation of AI is huge. What I'm seeing is really less paid channels and more of what we're talking about, more storytelling, more really dissecting your personas and your ICPs and understanding, and coming at things from an operator experienced type of perspective. Backing into your sales quotas. A lot of times, some of these products are big ticket sales items, and you don't need dozens and dozens of closes. You need maybe a small handful. So once you can back into that and really have a more, I don't want to say personalized outreach, but personalized and targeted seems to be sort of what I'm seeing is working. Some ABM is good, although that's usually like a cherry on top, but it's really about the storytelling. It's about demos, and it's about really just, the understanding and earlier we talked about all the clutter and how are you gonna, break through the clutter and being creative. But, you can't really come up with creative messaging or creative content formats or channel ideas if you don't have a really strong strategy, right? You've got to have that strategy nailed down so that when you're brainstorming against all these things, you've got something to evaluate your ideas against. And that's what we're seeing right now is some paid ads in terms of maybe testing some keywords here and there, but again, it's storytelling, it's understanding that persona, it's really peeling that onion back, it's getting your homepage dialed in, your sales funnels dialed in. It's almost like you're going back to the basics a little bit, because there's just so much noise out there and so much clutter, and you've got to find sort of a way to get in there. And we're seeing teams iterate quite a bit, which is really exciting for me, because we talked about earlier, it's not a set it and forget it type of world anymore. And I think if you can put all those things together, that's what's going to really move brands in 2026. The other part, obviously AI. I think where AI is really strong is not in crafting the strategy that we've been talking about that's so important, but really what to do after that, right? So if you can be somewhat, the term is agentic, and really talking to your AI and working through how to take strategy and implement these other executions or the messaging. I think that's where you can amplify your work. A lot of people do blog postings and AI postings. The AI postings for LinkedIn, those are very easy to spot. They lack strategy, and they're just not really sort of as human based as we need them to be. So you got to be careful. It's a word of caution for the AI, but I really think that AI is in its infancy. It's I sort of liken it to how dial-up internet was working back in the day, and I'm excited to see where it goes. But for now, you got to really harness it in the way that you can without sort of muddying your own positioning and your own strategy.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. You really get out what you put into AI. So if you come with a good strategy and you kind of feed it into it, say if you're coming up with ad copy, right? If AI really understands your brand strategy because you give it good quality information, it might be able to come up with some good, messaging, some good advertising copy that you might be able to play in and play out with. But if you're just, having to do all the thinking for you, it's really a non-starter.
Absolutely.
And what do you think in terms of authenticity too? Because I mean, for one, I get a lot of cold emails, and I can tell those are written by AI. I see a lot of LinkedIn posts that are obviously written by AI. And to me, I don't know if other people are
Mhm.
experiencing this as well, but to me, those become a big turnoff. I feel like it's very inauthentic. Do you feel like there's going to be kind of a pendulum swing back where people are going to really start to appreciate more brands that are using authentic tactics, or actually writing posts themselves, or actually sending you a real email written by a human? Or what do you think's going to happen there?
I hope you're right about that. I agree that the AI writing is really starting to take over, and it is easy to see. It's funny. The other day, I posted something on LinkedIn, and there was a response, and it didn't quite make a whole lot of sense. And then I looked at the title or the headline from the poster, and he was involved in some sort of AI thing, and I knew right away that he had an automated AI response going, and I think it just devalues the human connection, and
Yeah.
I think it to your point, I think it adds more noise, and it's just going to be one more thing that people are going to have their antenna up about. But like we said, if you could do it in the right way, I think it'll be very helpful. But I
Yeah.
just don't think that we're quite there yet.
Yeah. And don't over rely on anything for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess how does positioning evolve as a SaaS company moves from like early traction to scale?
So I think there's usually a shift that happens. For example, when I had Pet Check, the beginning of the positioning had to be twofold because we were creating entirely new category. So it started with education, and then it really had to really evolve into competitor differentiation, proof points, and more sort of repeatable go to market. But early in the life cycle of a business, you're going to be doing more education and explaining around the problem and sometimes the category. You got to make sure that the market understands you and your product. And then,
Yeah.
like I said, as you scale, we kind of touched on this earlier, but you can really start to prioritize maybe that one or two challenge set or problem set. You can really use some revenue use cases. Again, strengthen your proof and really sort of say why you're the best choice over other products in the marketplace.
Yeah. And how often, again, I know you mentioned this earlier, how often should brands revisit this strategy? And is there anything that could potentially trigger a reset?
Absolutely. I would say, no less than every 6 months, you should be sort of reevaluating your strategic documents. There's definitely things that can set it off. New competitor entries, an economic shift in the marketplace, buying habits that are changing. I think there's a number of things. When I was working with the health and safety software platform, it was so funny because I got in there and had to create some structure. There was no structure, no strategy. And to me, it was very much a living, breathing document. And the joke was that anytime I went on a partner sales call or did a demo, that Doug's going to be contacting us again to make tweaks here and there to change the deck, because you just learn so many things as you go, and taking that feedback, even if it's just a couple words here and there and your benefit statement, can really make the world of a difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've seen that in my career too, with products that, didn't do well. And then all of a sudden a couple of small tweaks in the positioning, and all of a sudden everybody gets it and sales accelerate really quickly. And it could just be, the difference in a couple words that you use to describe what the brand is and what your mission is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny how people can obsess, especially me, over just one or two words in a benefit statement, and like you said, how much impact that can really make across the board, across your storytelling, across your personas understanding. It just that's why I'm in it. I love it so much. I just love seeing sort of the ear to the ground, make these improvements that, move the needle, and, being a part of that and seeing that, to me, is just super exciting.
Yep. Yeah. I'm like that as well too. I'm always bugging my team about making small tweaks here and there, coming up with ways, how can we better position a product or explain what NachoNacho does. And it might seem a little relentless sometimes, but you really do have to get that feedback from your customers and constantly just think about how you can improve it. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing all this marketing and creating all this noise online like everybody else, might as well have the people convert while they're on site, right?
Absolutely.
And if it all comes back to a great story, and if you have that nailed, then it makes it a lot easier to do your job right.
Yeah. Just nailing that story can be challenging for sure.
Yep. So tell us more about where can people learn about Simon Marketing? What do you have coming up next for your company that we should all be excited about?
Yeah, well, if people want to get in touch or just go back and forth on what kind of questions they have about marketing, or what kind of advice they might be looking for, they can find us at simonfractional.com. We've got a really cool tool on there called Brand Score that actually helps you. It's a little quiz, and it helps you understand where your opportunities are, where your strengths are with your brand. We give you a free write-up with that. And also, we're very happy to walk you through in more detail in terms of specific steps to take, sort of like the ones we were talking about today. But yeah, that's where we live right now on simonfractional.com. We've got some openings now for some B2B clients, and we're ready to work with some great tech.
Awesome. Well, Doug, it's been a great chatting with you today. You're definitely a man of passion about your work, and that's what it takes to be a successful marketer. So everybody, again, that's simonfractional.com. Check them out today. They're also a partner with NachoNacho. So we're very excited to see your growth and be a part of your organization.